2 years ago, my father-in-law and I were deer hunting, and he almost got shot in the leg. Gentleman at the top of the hill was firing at a deer with a high-powered rifle, and the bullet impacted within a foot of his leg. Had he been hit, I'd have had to stop the bleeding and seek medical attention for him. I'm a 13-year Army veteran. In that time, I took numerous first aid courses. I went through Combat Lifesaver. I was a Combat Lifesaver for almost 7 years. Combat Lifesaver is a step below a medic and a step above a regular everyday soldier. To be able to stop bleeding, you have to know something about bleeding. There's 3 types of bleeding. There's capillary, venous, and arterial. Capillary is nothing more than basically a cat scratch. It's a little nick on your skin, bleeds a little bit, slap a band-aid on it, and it stops bleeding. Venous is deeper cut than capillary. It's close to a vein. Arterial is by far the worst type of bleeding you'll encounter. It's usually signified by bright red bleeding, spurts of blood coming out. As the name implies, it is either an artery was nicked or artery was completely severed. I'm going to demonstrate some ways to stop the bleeding, the process of it. Use Alexis here as our test subject. Some things you need to be aware of, some cautions. If you need to protect yourself when you're dealing with somebody that's bleeding. HIV, you want to be able to have latex gloves. Keep a box under your seat in your vehicle. Carry them on your person if you hunt like I do. Law enforcement, emergency responders generally carry them with them. If there's an object stuck in the wound, you do not want to remove it. You want to leave it. Somebody that has been stuck with a knife or has impaled themselves, when you pull it out, it does more harm than good. That object tends to help stop the bleeding. You want to use a tourniquet as a last resort. When you apply a tourniquet, you cut off circulation to the bottom part of the extremity. And when you do that, it tends to kill everything below that, so you may end up costing that individual a limb. And under no circumstances should you ever loosen a tourniquet if you have to apply one. The first step is Alexis, she has a little cut here. She's got a cut here on her arm, more than what a band-aid would take. This is an Army field dressing. It's good for stopping blood. It's thick, padding. You can use gauze, anything like that. You want to try to use something sterile, but if you don't have anything sterile, anything will do. The main thing is to get the bleeding stopped. Once you open a package, you want to make sure that you don't touch the inside. Grab the tails, you pull it out. Put other side next to wound. Kind of gives you some directions. If the casualty is conscious, they can help you hold the dressing in place. You want to wrap the tails around it, sealing in the edges. Seal the edges off. That'll help keep debris out of the wound. And then you tie it off on the side of the wound, about 2 fingers tight in a non-slip knot. We're going to tie a bow here. We reuse it. You should be able to get 2 fingers on there. Again, you don't want tourniquet-like effect. If the bleeding doesn't stop, you want to apply pressure for 5 to 10 minutes, elevated above the individual's heart. If the bleeding still does not stop, then you want to apply a pressure dressing. Pressure dressing is nothing more than the name implies. It's a dressing that you provide pressure on, and then you can take them and seek medical attention. You can take some cloth, wad it up, place it on top of the wound, take another strip of cloth, and wrap it over the top of the wadded up cloth, and this time you want to tie it right over the top of the wound. In a non-slip knot, you should be able to get one finger underneath this. You want a little tighter than your pressure dressing, but not so tight as it cuts off circulation and gives you the tourniquet effect. In Alexis's case, her bleeding didn't stop, so now you want to apply a tourniquet. Apply a tourniquet, you can use anything that will allow you to spin the bandage and get pressure. In this case, this is a cleaning rod. You use a stick, limb, anything. What you'll do is you can go inside here like this, and then you spin it until it gets really tight and it stops the bleeding, and then you use the tails to hold it in place so it doesn't spin back. Again, do not loosen it if you have to apply a tourniquet. There will be times that you have to skip this process. Again, if you have arterial bleeding, right off the bat, you're probably going to want to go with a pressure dressing. If they're missing a limb, you're going to want to go with a tourniquet. Just because if she loses an arm or a leg just because she's not bleeding doesn't mean she won't bleed to death. When a limb is severed, those nerve endings shrivel up, blood vessels shrivel up, and then they loosen up. And once they loosen up, blood will flow and the victim will bleed to death. You can also stop bleeding using pressure points. There's 11 pressure points. And you can start at the head, one here beside your temple. You have one in the lower part of your jaw. You have one in your neck. You have one in your shoulder. And you have one in here, your arm. You have your lower arm. You have one in your hand, right in here. You have one in your thigh, in your upper thigh. You have one down here in your lower thigh. One in your lower leg. And then you have one in your foot. What you want to do is, in the case of, again, somebody that's missing a limb or has arterial bleeding, you want to grab that pressure point nearest where they're bleeding. And when you do that and you apply pressure, it should help stem the flow of blood so that you can get a pressure dressing on and you can seek medical aid. I've been fortunate in all my time in the service and all the hunting I've done. I've never had to use any of the skills to stop bleeding. Hopefully none of you will ever in the future. But if you do, you want to remember you're going to protect yourself. You're going to apply a sterile dressing if you have one, field dressing, gauze, whatever. You're going to apply pressure if the field dressing doesn't stop the bleeding. If the field dressing and pressure don't stop the bleeding, then you're going to apply a pressure dressing. If that still doesn't stop the bleeding, you're going to want to apply a tourniquet. Again, do not ever loosen a tourniquet and only use it as a last resort.